Hello, my name is Anders. I'm the CEO in Præcis Denmark. I recently had the distinct pleasure of having a conversation with Caroline Whaley. This was part of our Marketing Through Generations series, where we speak to people who have a lot of experience in marketing and who can help us put today's marketing landscape into perspective. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
So we worked with about 10,000 women around the world, and we basically, through some transformational coaching and workshops, we actually help them develop clarity, develop confidence, and develop really strong connections with each other, with a view to them thriving and working their way through the organization. So we work mainly in the corporate world, mainly with agencies, funny enough, tons and tons and tons in advertising and media, but also banking, tech, across all the industries. FMCG.
Why banking? Do they need help?
Oh my goodness, do they need help?
I actually thought it was quite funny. I love that guy. I read that it's a very pragmatic approach to creating more diverse and humane organizations, simply by instilling like more women in leadership positions. At the end, I like that. I thought that was very good.
There is a little bit more to it than that, but it's it's a fundamental truth. When you start to even up your leadership teams, then people think differently. We create more collaboration. I mean, there's a ton of stats I won't get into now.
Yeah.
But it works. It does actually work, and there's lots.
It does. I don't think you need a scientific argument. You can just be like, and also it works.
Well, yes, funny enough, it's kind of part of my, I think, particularly in the last 18 months, probably 2 years, the whole conversations around diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging have all become very sort of heavy, and actually, if you get back to the basics of what it is to be really human, and by the way, when I say human, there's all the good stuff about being kind and compassionate, but there's also being flawed and messy and making mistakes and all the rest of it, which sometimes gets kind of missed out. So we literally encourage everyone to turn up as their whole messy selves, personal, professional, bring it all. And actually, particularly for women, if their work lives aren't working, their personal lives aren't working. If their personal lives aren't working, then their work lives don't work. So actually, women don't compartmentalize. You guys are much better at compartmentalizing work and home than we are. And so we just okay, show up, we'll work with it all. And that way, actually, we get women to really thrive.
That phrase really resonated with me. It's something that I've been trying to preach as well to others since I had that realization myself. I think I was 5-6 years into my career. I realized I wasn't particularly happy, and one of the reasons why I wasn't particularly happy is because I started out in a big corporation, and I thought, and it was also sort of preached, that you should be professional, you should act in a particular way, you should wear a suit, you should be serious in meetings because money is serious, and I was so out of sync with who I am. Like my background was in stand-up comedy, and all of a sudden I was doing business meeting with like Excel charts and people who were sweating when revenue was down 2% week on week, and I just realized that wearing that professional mask every single day to work, it didn't work for me, nor did it work for anyone around me, because nobody really benefits from it.
No, but also people see through that. If you're not the guy who normally turns up in a suit, everybody knows it. So there's this something. I actually have, my entire career has been driven around the fact that I haven't had to wear a suit. I've never owned a suit ever, and it's been. I can remember sitting in the. I did an MBA a good many years ago now, and I can remember going through all the kind of careers stuff around it, and it was like, so Caroline, what do you want to do, after your MBA? And it was like, I don't care as long as I don't wear a suit. Of course, I went to Nike, so I never had to wear a suit at Nike after that. So, but it was just like, it is. I know that I do not thrive in formal environments. It just doesn't work for me. Never have done. I've worked in sport. I've worked in outdoor education. I've worked, it's just, everything's been about leisure, outdoor leisure, hospitality, all of that, and none of that requires it. And I would be a nightmare. In fact, Anna, my business partner, tends to not let me get in front of the bankers very often. She keeps me away. I am let out occasionally, but I have to go and dust down my wardrobe a bit.
That's funny. Would you say that is it because I remember you're also you gave an interview on the Shine webpage where you talk about what is Shine and what are some of the values and tools you try to instill in young women. And you said that one of them is to be aware of where you want to be heading. So I actually thought that would be like a nice segue into like at which point in your career did you become aware that you wanted to work in marketing? But I need to make sure that it's actually something that happened. Did that happen? Like,
Oh,
did you want to work in marketing, or is it more so like, well, in hindsight, this is how we should have done things?
yeah, I benefit of hindsight. No, I mean, I have to be really honest. My career is, I'd have to work quite hard to explain how linear it might look on paper, because it wasn't at all. And everything I've done is because I've been in a position where something's come to me which has just excited me. So I have followed everything based on my gut and my heart, never by my head or my wallet for that matter. So there was, funny enough, when I did a bit of marketing when I was working in the outdoor industry, but nothing, I didn't know much. And then I went to do my MBA, and it was out of that. Funny enough, I was working in HR, and then I went and did my MBA, and I thought that either I would change industry or change function at the end of it. I didn't imagine I could do both. And actually what happened is Nike, being smart that they did, what they saw was the transferable skill that actually working in HR, that what you learn is to really understand people and to really understand what makes people tick. And so they actually gave me an amazing job to go and run consumer insights in Europe. So it's a really natural shift, and that was my route into marketing within Nike, was through I've obviously done a lot of interviewing, I've done a lot of the people side of things, so it was a beautiful shift into that. So I actually changed industries and changed functions, which was a dream, really. That was brilliant. So that was, I guess, a pretty pivotal moment in the shift into marketing. That was my route in.
Okay, so from HR to marketing, because you understand people.
Yeah, but isn't that at the root of everything we do? I mean, that's the doesn't matter what job you do, you've got to understand people. So but it was definitely it wasn't that big a shift really in the end.
Okay. All right. So that's effectively how you got into marketing. That was and you were working in HR at Nike as well. So it was within there.
No, never worked in HR at Nike. I was always on the marketing side or as a GM. Great. In Nike. Yeah.
All right.
Never went back.
Okay. Just to set the stage, if you could talk a little bit about your career and how you ended up working in marketing, just as a in a few sentences.
Yeah. So going back a bit, you mean going back pre where I started?
A little bit, just so we have like a linear understanding of how you ended up working marketing. We don't have to dive into the fact that it was all random and you followed your heart. We could do that later, but just to set the stage, and then I can, because I'd like to ask you like a few questions about like how you've seen marketing change over the years.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you wouldn't mind, just like very briefly walk us through your career and help us understand how you ended up working with marketing at predominantly, I guess, Nike.
Yeah, sure. So just grew up with a total passion for sport. And ended up going to do a business degree. My first degree was business degree, and as part of that, I had to do a year out. It was a 4-year course, and I did a year out. And I ended up working for this fantastic company called PGL in the UK, which was focused, it was about activity holidays for kids. So it was all outdoor activity holidays. So completely, hence why I didn't have to wear a suit in my first job either. And I went back there after I graduated, and I spent 10 years there working in tour operations, working in, I did a bit of marketing as part of that, and then ended up running recruiting all the seasonal staff. So we took on about 3,000 seasonal staff every year to work across all the centres, activity centres. And so I ran that. And then latterly actually took on the sort of the head office HR role, which I kind of, was just a sort of natural progression really. So that was my sort of first 10 years, absolutely loved it. and I learned, it was a small company, and I learned just so much about, it's the sort of path of least resistance. I just did what came, and it was just a really lovely small company to work for. And I kind of ran out of runway. So that's why I decided to go and do my MBA. I went off to Lancaster University in the UK, did my MBA, had a slightly strange moment in my MBA, because I went because I really didn't know what I wanted to do next. And actually, I learned a lot about myself that year, because I learned that I had a brain, which was quite exciting, because I didn't know that at that point. And not only did I have a brain, but I was actually quite good at putting it to good use, and that I was never going to be the most academic person by a million miles away from being the most academic, but I was really good at getting people together and making things happen. So, the all-nighters that we had to pull to get coursework in and things, I'd be the one kind of driving it to actually getting it done, but I certainly wouldn't have been the person doing all the formulas behind it, So it was a great year for me in that. And then out of that, I worked in the pub for 6 months. That was always a good leveler. Good for me, yeah, good for my financial management skills and pouring pints. But actually the reason why, because I just didn't want to jump straight into something, and I really didn't know what it was. And at the end of my MBA, I'd spent a couple of months sitting on top of the mountains in the Lake District in the UK doing research for an outdoor clothing company. So as part of my final year project, my final project on thesis for, and out of that, I met a headhunter who suggested I went and talk to Nike. So I got on a plane, went to Amsterdam, got interviewed by about 3 or 4 people, and they went for a product job at Nike. And at the end of it, they went, "You absolutely are the last person who would be good for this job. No, but we really like you." So it took a little while. It took about 4 or 5 months. And then they actually came back to me, a few more interviews, a few more trips to Amsterdam. And then I landed this job running consumer insights in Europe, which was just a dream. Honestly, it was such a dream. And that was my route into marketing. And from then on, it was another 17 years at Nike, mainly in marketing from there on.
What do you think? Why did you stay 17 years in Nike? That's a phenomenally long time.
Yeah.
Even 10, 15 years ago, that would have been a long time. But
yeah, and I never imagined it would be. Actually, I thought they'd kick me out. They'd work out that I was a fraud pretty quickly. So I thought I wouldn't last very long anyway. But no, without doubt, the reason was, and there was so many gifts that came my way, because just every couple of years there was something new. So, I spent 2 years in consumer insights, and then I ended up going back to the UK to do marketing for the UK and Ireland around women's sport. And then 2 years after that, I went to run the launch of Nike Town in London. And then 2 years after, it just came in these lovely 2-year waves. I don't think I ever did a job more than 3 years in Nike. And maybe because I wasn't good at them, I hadn't thought about that. But I don't think that was going right. But there was just always something new and exciting. And I'm just always drawn by a blank sheet of paper or something to fix, or, something that was just fresh and new. So I literally went from there. I went from London. So we launched Nike Town. I then went back to Europe, actually, to run the running business. And then the next thing I knew, we were on a plane to Canada, went to Toronto for 3 years and ran the brand in Canada, which was really fun. Actually, probably one of the best bits of it. And then on to Portland, Oregon for 2 years to run marketing for the Americas, so Latin America and Canada. And then took a sabbatical of a year, and came back as the GM for running in the Olympics, because the Olympics was coming to London. So I on that. And actually, even before the Olympics happened, I was approached. I had an amazing opportunity to take everything I had learned from building a brand like Nike, and I was given this brief, basically, to go, okay, take everything you've learned about building a brand and apply it to solving world poverty. There's a brief, isn't it? There's a brief.
That's a brief.
Yeah.
That's a rare opportunity to actually do something extremely meaningful with
Yes.
the toolbox that you have acquired.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was either crawl under a stone and say no, or I mean, it was just such a crazy opportunity. And I funny enough, met the CEO of Nike, Mark Parker, who was there at the time, who said to me, because I said, I don't get why you want why me, you know, why? And he said, I don't want you to become a student of international development. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to take 14 years of building a brand and going, what can we take from that and actually apply it? And the Nike Foundation was established at that point, and it was focused on the role that adolescent girls play in eradicating global poverty. So if a girl is educated, is not married or having babies before she should, and gets into some sort of gainful employment, she will reinvest around 95% of what she earns back into her family, whereas a boy will only reinvest about 35%. He'll spend the rest on himself. So if you think about the impact on a family, on a community, on a nation, then it's, you know, it's just exponential. So so I took my marketing skills as I knew them, and went, okay, so what do we do? And spent the next 3 years building brands with girls in Africa, to empower them and shift social norms. So, you know, just radical shift in one way, but another opportunity just to recycle my skills and think about the role that brands play, you know, in such a broader, you know, behavior change and all the other good stuff we know.
In the time that you, by the way, I think that statistic is probably like the really underlines a horrible sex that I belong to. What if did you say 35%? Only 35% will be invested back into the family.
Yeah. I mean, this
God.
is, you know, maybe it's shade, and of course, you know, we are looking. There will be men watching this who go, "That's not fair," and it won't be fair for everybody. But that is a really genuine statistic, and it's. But you know, and the other scary thing about that, of course, is that girls are often the ones who are marginalised. They're often the ones who aren't get educated, you know, in developing countries. So actually, or you know, married and having babies at 12, 13 years old. So shocking things happen. So actually, you've got a double edged sword on that one, because not only are they not getting to economic empowerment, you know, they you know, you're missing this massive opportunity cost of doing that, of not having them get to some kind of economic empowerment. So it's.
I wanted to ask you, you said you took like 14 years of experience working with like building brands and putting that to really good use. Can you, during that time of working on building brands, did anything change? Like, did how you build a brand fundamentally change over the time that you work with marketing? I also suspect that during this time, digital became a much more sort of influential player and a factor to be reckoned with. Did the core foundation of like how you build a brand change, in your opinion?
So interesting. I think marketing changed. I don't think building a brand changed. And actually, I'm not sure it still has. So what it takes to build a brand is I really don't think it's changed. And actually, it's something I you know, don't particularly like about where marketing has gone. But you know, the tools that we had in our armory when, you know, I started were way different. And actually, it was kind of an interesting experience for me, because you know, I think back to when we launched Nike Town, we had no digital strategy. I mean, it was 1999, right? So we launched Nike Town in 99. You know, we had out of home campaigns, we had teaser campaigns, we had minis running around London with our campaign. We had TV, we had radio, you know, I mean, we had all that good marketing stuff, and we were the masters of integrated marketing. That was the thing. You know, I cannot tell you how many PowerPoint presentations I had with all the little elements of, you know, PR and TV and radio and, you know, all the elements of integrated marketing. And that was marketing at its best, and you know, product, everything just lined up. And I think when I was in marketing, that was our sort of heyday of really having a very powerful brand that we built every day. My boss always used to say, brands aren't built by themselves, but you know, we were conscious of it from you know, the way the telephone gets answered, at, you know, the doormat at reception, the way we showed up, every single thing was about the brand, and that never, ever, ever went away. And it was constant. And I think that still happens. You know, great brands still do that today. They live and breathe those brand values day after day after day, and they make them a reality. But obviously the kind of marketing we were doing really has changed. And so the you know, really the digital side of things didn't start coming in. I suppose I think of the first campaign when we had a good digital strategy. I mean, it was probably only a year, actually straight after that, funny enough, I did this amazing, there's do you know AKQA? Do you know the digital agency? So I worked very closely with the JARS, and we tried to build a, basically what would be called now a social network in London, where we were trying to get particularly guys, but girls as well, who were playing football in the parks, to try and create a sort of a social network where people could take on other teams, you know, and they was using jumpers for goal posts and stuff in the park and things. And we tried to build that, but I mean, imagine we were building from scratch, and that would have been 2000, the first time we tried to do something really like that. And then over the years after that, you know, digital just became a really bigger and bigger part of the strategy. And then, of course, things started to happen where we suddenly weren't in control of our brand in the same way. So I can remember there being a moment when Tiger Woods won the Masters, and somebody created a little short video with "Just Do It," and it went viral, as we used to talk about in those days. And we hadn't done that. That hadn't come from marketing, from Nike. And that was the first time we suddenly realized that actually, you know, you're not as in control of your brand. Everything until that point was you put this on TV and you put that on radio and you put that in print or whatever it was. And all of a sudden, you know, digital started to open up that sense that you were not in, you didn't have the same level of control of your brand anymore that you used to. And actually that could have been really scary, or it could have been something that you can really take advantage of. And what we did is we went with it, you know, and that became really fun. I mean, what I would say, and I really noticed this when I moved over to work in the foundation in 2010, 2011, something like that. You know, and we were printing magazines in a shed in you know, Addis Ababa, and delivering, or actually Kigali in Rwanda, and delivering them on the back of mopeds. So the concept of digital strategies and everything just like out of the window. It was, I mean, it was so back to basics. And actually that has changed, you know, since I've been gone. So there is much more digital because there's so much more mobile available now. But I mean, desktop doesn't exist, but mobile definitely does. But I mean, we so went back to basics. We had to build a creative team. We had to take a creative team out to Addis Ababa to do the work because there was no creative industries anywhere at that point. So we were so down and dirty and so in the weeds. You know, we had printing presses practically in the back garden, you know, to do what we were trying to do at the time. And that was only, you know, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. But interestingly, what I realized is during that time, I was sort of in living that world for about 3 years, is that marketing changed radically in the UK and the US during that time. And I actually have a kind of a sort of memory lapse almost from that 3 years of I was just not up to speed. And in fact, I don't think I've ever caught up from that, because it was almost like things moved on so radically during those sort of the end of the 2000s, running into 2000, and it would have been 8 through to sort of 2013. Things changed so much during that time.
Yes.
And I got way left behind. I mean, I was doing fabulous work and I loved it. I wouldn't have changed it for the world, but I suddenly came back into it and realized that actually I was way out of step. It was a really big 5 years, I think, in the digital world that just, you know, I missed. I was like, I slept through it, I think.
Yeah, it coincides with the emergence of Facebook as well as a major player. So all of a sudden you had search really taking off around that time, and then Facebook taking off and really sort of coining the whole foundation for performance marketing. And if you
Absolutely.
weren't there, then you wouldn't. I mean, you missed the train. That would make sense.
Yeah, and
Um,
I definitely feel that now. I mean, I have a very strong sense of building a brand, you know, and especially having a small business and building a brand from scratch, and feel very powerfully strong about that. And I still think every touch counts. I really believe that. But it's I would say my marketing skills now are, you know, gone. I mean, I'm not a marketeer anymore. It's not what I do nowadays. And thank heavens for the people who do, I say. But I think there is it's the brand bits that stayed with me, not the marketing bit, honestly.
how do you see from where you're sitting then, from like a helicopter perspective on the marketing industry? Then, like, how do you see? Like, are there any like major changes or shifts or unfortunate developments that you would point to in particular?
Yes, I think what it's done is it's created a much more transactional industry, which the good side of it now is you can do marketing so much cheaper than you ever used to. You know, we were working with multi-million-dollar budgets and stuff, and we couldn't have done anything without them. You know, it was we were reliant on millions of dollars, and that doesn't have to happen now. You can do an amazing Facebook campaign and spend, you know, $60 and still do great stuff. So I think the fact that marketing is much more, you know, the instant impacts of it is a really good thing. And you know, the agencies a lot of the agencies are still catching up with that. You know, it's hard to find an old school creative who doesn't want to make a TV spot still, you know, and that's moved way beyond. So I think that side of it is really good. I think the transactional bit of it, though, is the bit that concerns me somewhat, because I think what's happened is that the concept of long-term brand building is nowhere near as strong as it was. So if you look at a lot of CMOs nowadays, they're not brand builders. They're very much marketeers and very much transactional marketeers. And I don't think as it's a you know, I can almost argue with myself on this one, but you know, I do think that brands that really still succeed really create something, you know, create emotion in us, and that isn't a transactional thing. You don't build relationships with people through, you know, one-off savvy conversations. It takes time, and it takes building trust, and there's a ton of emotional intelligence in there, and I still believe that is a vital part. And I do worry that a lot of the work is so transactional and so financially driven, that a lot of CMOs who have got an eye on an instant win will actually not build the brands that really connect with consumers over time. But maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe that's the end of long-term brands. Maybe short-term brands will come and go, and there'll be a new challenger, and you know, and we'll be happy with that.
Yeah, maybe you can always run a 50% off campaign and communicate that in your messaging to your audience. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, I think I like the way you used to describe it, the instant impact, and I think it coincides with what you were all of a sudden able to do, right? Particularly in the time where you were printing posters in Africa. But where everyone else was like obsessed with this new promise from Google and Facebook, you don't have to pay for anything that you cannot measure the impact of within just a few hours, really. And then all of a sudden, people got really obsessed with anything that lives and breathes within an Excel sheet, and you sort of eventually actually sacrificed your brand because of that. What do you think? What do you think we can do? What are sort of like some of the values or skills that we need to then to maybe reinstill into CMOs today?
Yeah, I just think we need to bring brand building back into marketing, because I think the fact that brand marketing moves faster, stronger P&L responsibility, all of those things are really good stuff. That's good stuff. So what I think we just need to do is bring back the idea of what it is to build a genuine relationship with a consumer. And I have to be super careful here, because you know, if you were talking to my, you know, people who run digital marketing in my own company, they'd be like, "You're so old, Caroline, you're so old." And I kind of am in this sense. I am old school. So what for me is about, for me to connect with a brand, I need that trust. I need to know that that brand is going to deliver on the values that it promises to me. And maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe, for 20, 25-year-olds, they don't care. Maybe they don't care because they're moving so much faster than I am. But I think there is, and I'm really happy to be proved wrong on this. But I just think that bringing back that concept of quality of brand is really important. What I find really hard, for example, is just this sort of constant posting, just get it out the door, get it out the door, get it out of the door. That is not good enough if the actual quality of the message is not good enough, if the thought that's behind how you really connect with the consumer isn't there. So I just think this sort of just get it out, just will start to add up to nothing, and over time, what I'd like to see, or certainly how I want to, it's really important. And the business I run now is so built around trust. If you are coaching people and you are responsible for supporting, coaching, challenging people about building their future, they are not going to trust me if I'm just like chucking messages at them. That doesn't mean anything to them. They need to know that I'm creating a safe space for them. They need to know that I had their interest at heart. They have to know that I actually care. And so chucking messages out into the world, for me, absolutely fills me with horror.
I think that should resonate with a lot of CMOs across even just Europe, at least that we speak to, where they've successfully built a business on performance marketing, but maybe along the way they forgot to invest in their brand, and all of a sudden they realize that there's a limit to how much revenue they can drive just from performance marketing, or they realize that we can't really make people pay full price for our products anymore because we have not invested enough in our brand. But in terms of like engaging in those genuine connections with your audience, how would you go about that? Like, what would be your suggestion to someone who's never practiced that before and who wants to understand how to connect with their core audience?
So actually, well, that's where digital.
3 easy steps.
I mean, it is all about. I mean, I go back to my first marketing job. It's about putting yourself into the shoes of a consumer. It absolutely is, and it's not difficult. This is about empathy. It's about listening. It's about really understanding what makes people tick. I mean, they won't. There's an old adage, isn't there, about they won't. Consumers won't tell you what product to make. They're never going to innovate for you. But understanding what makes people tick is the ultimate. I mean, that is the only way to make great product. It's the only way to do, great communications, is when you can connect with somebody and they really feel that you care, then you can make magic happen. You really can. And it's so just this. I think it's because of the pace of it as well that gets left behind. So we now have tools in our out there because of digital to stay connected with consumers in a way that we never used to. We used to have to go out and do heavy focus groups and huge surveys and all that kind of stuff. Now we can actually have an intimate relationship through our social media. We can learn what makes people tick, but we have to do something with that. And obviously there's a data side to that as well, which is but data is only as good as how we really understand what's in that data, so it's taking it in, and it's just putting the human back into it, to my mind. I mean, there's nothing I hate more than them being marketed at, and just the detail around that kind of thing of, like, I don't know, but here we get this, dear Caroline Whaley. I mean, just do not write me an email which has got my first and my last name. I mean, you can call me Mrs. Whaley if you have to. I'd rather you didn't. But dear Caroline Whaley, really? I mean, this day and age, there is just the sort of things that wind us up, but equally make a difference to us, are so. The only way you would do that is to put yourself into the shoes of the consumer themselves, to really listen to them. And I think that would be, if we do anything, empathetic listening would be the one.
Empathetic listening
Yeah.
sounds like it. I will say though that if you do a little bit of research on you, you actually do come across as a wonderful person. Also, just from reading about you, so maybe that's what they did. They're just like, oh, she's really great. I love you. I love you. No, I feel the same. I also don't particularly enjoy smileys and emojis and business emails. Like that's also a weird thing.
Is the weird one? Yeah.
It's
Well,
so
yeah.
weird.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I like the fact that it's becoming more informal. I do like that, but it actually, the informality of communications in some ways is a really tricky one, right? Because getting that right is much harder in the days when you write somebody a letter or even just, you know, a more formal communication, whereas going informal is quite a dangerous game. You know, you have to play that. We particularly do this because being human is so important to us, that being human doesn't mean being you know, it can't mean that you're just sort of lax. It's not about that, but it's you know, some of the really informal communications I get when people are trying to sell me something, it's just like, back off, you don't know me, you know, you can't talk to me like that. But I think it makes for a trickier game than when we used to have a much more formal approach to communication.
I think that's right. If you were to sort of give advice to someone who's about to embark on a career in marketing for however long that's going to take, what would that be?
Literally starting out on it. Starting out.
Yeah, yeah. They're considering moving into digital marketing or marketing in general.
Well, you know, I would definitely do it because it's an amazing industry to be in. It's a really fun industry, so to be in. I think I would also work agency side and client side. So definitely get experience on both sides of the fence, because I think that really helps. I mean, I do worry for the relationships between agencies and clients at the moment. And I think working on both sides is all about building empathy. And what else would I say? Part of me says don't do it. It's but I think it's an amazing industry to cut your teeth on. But there's a lot of people that definitely come to me now who say, I've absolutely loved it, but I need to do something with more purpose now. So, and my advice to them is, how do you bring more purpose into the work you do? Because actually every brand you work with now has to have purpose. You can't just rock up and be some you know, without purpose at the heart of your brand. And so it's kind of like, go there, but don't fall into the trap of marketing for marketing's sake. Actually do better, you know, make brands better.
Why do you think that is? Like you said, and sorry for interrupting, but you said every brand today has to have purpose. Why do you think that is? Why is that? Is that a change? And why do you think that is?
It is definitely a change. I say every brand. You know, there's lots of celebrity brands that I don't think have much purpose, who seem to do incredibly well. So good on them. But I think if you want people to part with their money, then people need to feel that they are buying into something that has more meaning to it than just purely making money. And then we see this over and over again. I mean, in the same way that the work we do around diversity is a way of attracting better and better talent. You know, people are not only doing because it's the right thing and it also makes them more creative, but they also know that actually their corporate reputation depends on it. If they don't have enough women at the top, that matters. So a lot of the companies that we work with have got their brand in mind. And, you know, I mean, there isn't a brand I work with who isn't thinking about how they develop as a brand that has real meaning for their consumers. You know, we've got the Glasgow conference going on at the moment, for example. You know, I mean, you just look at the focus on sustainability or the focus on diversity. I mean, all of these subjects are so hot right now. Consumers care. They really care. And in fact, my generation is worse. You know, the next generation are demanding it more and more. They're demanding how they work, what their business, what their companies stand for. They won't go and work for companies that don't don't put purpose at the heart of who they are. And I think, and consumers will vote with their wallets. There's no doubt about it, in my mind. And I also think this sort of, these making money and doing good don't have to be mutually exclusive. They just don't, you know. So if you're starting a brand now, you know, you have to build it in. It's not some bolt-on CSR strategy that happens over here. And people see through it. You know, there's so much transparency of brands, right? You know, so I just think, and I just, you know, there's a generation growing up now who just will not tolerate some of the things that we tolerated, my generation tolerated.
Yeah, I saw a very concerning survey. We were in in Sønderborg, it's a Danish city which is quite known for sustainability. They built like a whole infrastructure which makes them one of the most sustainable cities in the world. But there was a conference there on called "Impact: The Future of the Future." And to prepare myself for the conference, I looked through a study that was conducted in Denmark, so SMB. They polled 5,000 SMBs, and only 1 in 3 is actually actively working on a sustainability agenda. So SMB in this context is companies with less than 249 employees, but still significant, really concerning that only 1 in 3 is actively engaged with this. With this agenda, and I think one of the reasons is that people don't know where to start. They just have no idea where to start. They don't know how to measure it. They know that their customers potentially care, but they don't know how to sort of decipher it. I don't know if you have any advice for
it's interesting because we have this around, if I think about, you know, going out to talk about Shine nowadays, that, you know, when we started, Anna and I made a very clear decision that we were never going to work with people who are just trying to do, you know, box ticking exercises about, oh, we've got a women's leadership program, we're done, you know, put it in our report, annual report. So we decided from day one we were only going to work with people who are genuinely really genuine about this. And we've definitely seen a shift over the time, you know, that initially it was like, you know, why should we do this? And particularly sort of older school male CEOs, I don't see why we need to do this. And then literally in the last 7 years, we've seen the shift from that through to how do we do it? How do we do it fast? And then how do we do it and take everyone with us? And we've seen this incredible evolution go on just in the industry in which I work now around diversity and inclusion, which has moved like literally every year since we've been doing this, from something that was just sort of a kind of, I guess we've got to do it, through to we need to do this because it matters. It affects our business, it affects our profitability, it affects our ability to attract and retain staff, you know, and it's so deep now. But what happened, you get people who are absolutely paralyzed by it. Do I do gender? Do I do race? Do I do LGBTQ? You know, it's just sort of like, and it's like, actually do something. Just do something. Start somewhere, and be honest. Funny enough, when I was at Nike, we was when all the this is going back a long time now, but when a lot of the initial criticism about factories in Southeast Asia was coming, and labor issues, and you know, it was not an easy time. But one of the things that the Nike chose to do was to publish an independent report on the status of their factories and workers in their factories. And I think that transparency goes a long way. It's not about trying to plug every hole. It's about saying, okay, this is a journey that will go on and on and on and on and on, whether it's sustainability, diversity, whatever it is. All of these things will carry on, but start somewhere. And be honest about where you're trying to get to, and be honest about where your gaps are, but at least show that you are making progress. And I think people will deal with that, because these subjects are so big and so complex and so overwhelming that it's just like, just start. I'm just very conscious when we sort of, you know, are driving brands from a corporate perspective, you know, we were on it, and then suddenly you go to Africa and everything got blown up, right? Because nothing works. I mean, you can work in Nigeria. The only thing that works in parts of Nigeria was corruption, for example. You know, so the complexity on one hand was really, you know, it was hard to do the work. But on the other hand, there was a beautiful simplicity in it as well, because you didn't have any of the, we didn't have all the options to us anymore. We didn't, it took us back to real basics of what are we going to do to empower young women and help shift social norms. And we were trying to, how do you measure empowerment? So, we were trying to do right. So we were using, money to build brands to empower girls. So we really, this is not just selling shoes anymore. This is actually changing people's lives and potentially saving people's lives, And so we had to go back and go, so how do we measure this in a really responsible way? And it was really hard, to apply. We didn't have data in the same way that we do nowadays. And actually I had this amazing moment where we had this radio station in Rwanda, a radio show in Rwanda for girls, and they would have listening circles and come and listen to the radio. And what the idea was is that they could ring in and ask questions. And we had this incredible moment of realization that actually the moment of empowerment was when these girls were dialing in, not to ask questions, but to give the answers. So, and you suddenly realize that they were actually passing on to the next girls what they had learned from doing the work with us, Nini Minga, which was the name of the magazine and the radio show. And there was a simplicity about that, of realizing that you can have as much data in the world, you can have huge budgets, but actually there was this moment of just recognition of actually that's the moment of empowerment. That's how you measure empowerment, for example, is when a girl starts to pass it on to the next one. I mean, that's old school pyramid selling, right? But actually, I think there is just, I know I'm rambling a bit and you can edit this out, but there is a simplicity to that kind of thing. Oh, and by the way, that night, the night we went into a bar in Kigali to have a drink, and they had a cocktail named after the magazine that we'd created. And that was another sign for us that we had actually got embedded into society. We knew that we were making progress. So, and there was no spreadsheet, there was no focus group, there was no nothing. And I just think there's something about these moments that we still need to remember, that at its core, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to create those little shifts in behaviors that actually, if we just keep our eyes and ears open, we'll find that way, rather than making it any more complex than it has to be.
That's brilliant. I don't think we updated that at all. I thought that was very good. And I think, at least for me, it's been really inspiring talking to you, Caroline, but also reading up on you before. And I really like the pragmatic approach to diversity inclusion, like the pointing out the obvious differences between men and women, which has sort of actually been fairly difficult in the last couple of years, where you were not supposed to talk about differences between the sexes, which I found at least very difficult when approaching like a recruiting process, because you effectively actually have to treat the sexes differently, because men will tend to brag in their CVs, and women will try to hide all their accomplishments for whatever reason, which is only really possible if you take sort of an active stance on how to explore that further. But I thought it was very good. And then I thought I'd read out loud. I saw someone wrote about you on LinkedIn in one of those endorsements, which are normally quite fun, but this case I thought it was really good. In Caroline's team, you feel part of a collective. She's thoughtful, provocative, inspiring, and passionate. Sprinkle in her genuine and humble persona, and you have one of the most progressive types of leaders and thought partners today. I think that seems very spot on from this conversation. So thank you very much for.
I must go back and have a look at that. Who wrote that?
You should. It's. I'm giving the person an honor. It was a guy. Yeah, you should go back and read that. It should be a booster.
I'm a serial team builder. I love it. I do love it.